Hey everybody, how you doing? Well, that's good. Welcome to PHLY Flyers. My name is Bill Matz. I'm your director of fun and games for this windy, beautiful F Around Friday. Joining me, as always, is Philadelphia's #1 hockey beat reporter, Charlie O'Connor, as well as Broad Street Hockey's own Kelly Hinkle. How we doing today, fam?
It sure is windy, William.
That it is. I'm looking forward. I'm hoping.
Hey-o.
So Green Day playing at Citizens Bank Park tonight,
Oh,
and I'm
yeah.
heading down.
Ooh.
And part of me is like, you're 35. Like, good weather would be cool. But I'm like, shit, man, maybe I can get on the field. It'll be just like 94, a mud fight. This is gonna be great. Ava's like, you realize they like put something down on the grass, right? Like, you're not gonna be on the outfield.
It's not gonna be like a 99 situation with like a mud pit. No,
yeah.
Okay.
I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But here we are. It is F Around Friday. We have a bunch of things to get to. Honestly, we only got through like 3 seasons of the hits leaders last week, so we're gonna do more of that. We're gonna do our biggest misses, like guys, moves, whatever we just kind of got wrong. I know. Listen, the Flyers have got a bunch wrong in the last 10 years. So if you've ever thought anything was going to work out for them, that's a miss. So we're going to talk about a few of those over the next hour or so. But I want to lead off with a tweet we got from a regular contributor, our buddy Stackatoshi. Just something he brought up about the conversation yesterday, and it started out good. And we have a screenshot of it. No, it's fine. It says good convo on Farabee. The organization struggles to make calls on guys. They always have a reason why someone didn't perform but still has upside and won't move them. How many years have we heard now that it's the make or break year for Frost? Why do we need so many evaluation years? And then he goes on to say they tend to hold on to guys until they have no value left and eventually require them to be bought out / retain salary. It's okay to trade high on guys. You can't trade your trash for a 1C. Be bold, Danny. Take a risk. And like, listen, I'm all for Danny making some hard judgments, taking a risk, seeing if things will pay off. Given the path that they're on, if they want to be a true Stanley Cup contender without bottoming out and getting a whole bunch of top 5 picks, you're going to have to take a risk at some point. Absolutely 100%. But I want to start with the last part of this first. Who are these players that they've had, like that they took too long to evaluate and then ended up having to buy out or retain salary on? I came up with a list of some dudes, and it's not complete. I couldn't find like, hey, here's the comprehensive list of everyone the Flyers have bought out or retained salary on. But the buyouts have typically been dudes that they thought were real good, and then they had to move on from, or somebody it was just like, we need the salary cap space. LeClaire and Amati, that was, listen, we're starting over, and we got to sign Peter Forsberg and Darian Hatcher, so you guys are out of here. Briz and Briere, it's like, well, we fucked up bad with Briz. We need to get out of this while we can. And then Briere, it was like, he's got a year or 2 left, and we need the cap space. Umberger, he stunk. Tony D, he stunk. Lindblom, it was just like, yeah, we signed you to a contract that you probably should have signed. Like, we could have signed you to before you got sick, but now you're not that player anymore, and we need the cap space so we can sign Tony DeAngelo, obviously. Great idea. Like, retain salary, like, without thinking about dudes who, like, you know, they, like the Noah Hannafin trade where they played middleman. Like Vinny LeCavalier, Kevin Hayes, these are dudes they just had to get away from. There's probably a bunch more, but like, who are these guys that we took too long to evaluate and then needed to move on from in this way?
Do we think Ghost falls into this? Like,
yeah, I was.
Moved on from
I thought about him.
Yeah.
I think I will say I think this is like where Stackatoshi is coming from is a little bit colored by just frustration and not by reality. However, I do think that if there is a group of players that you can say that they I don't love the way like the framing of waited too long on, but it more is guys that they thought were going to be real good, so they kept them, and then turned out that they weren't. And I think the group that very much that falls into that is that mid to late 2010s defense core. I'm thinking Shane Gostisbehere, Ivan Provorov, Phil Myers, like the only guy in that group that ultimately became what I think like reasonable expectations were was Sanheim. Sanheim's the only guy who you're like, he basically hit what I think was a reasonable expectation for a ceiling. But like in retrospect, if you would have traded Ivan Provorov in 2018, 2019, I mean, and they got a good return for him, probably would have gotten a lot more. I think, for example, and I don't know this for sure, but reading the tea leaves, I think that they probably could have traded, just knowing what Kadri was ultimately traded for and knowing that the Flyers were involved in that conversation, I think they could have traded Phil Myers for Nazem Kadri. In retrospect, that would have been real good because Toronto really, really wanted a right-handed shooting defenseman, and the Flyers, from everything I heard that summer, they were basically like, we're not going to trade Phil Myers. We think he's going to be great. Kadri ultimately gets traded to Colorado. They get back a right-handed shooting. What's his name? The offensively oriented defenseman.
Barry?
Yeah, Tyson Barry. I suspect they could have used Phil Myers as a centerpiece for Kadri, and in retrospect, it would have been a hell of a lot better than what they ultimately got for Myers, which was 5 games of Ryan Ellis. And then Ghost. Like, look, I enjoyed the Shane Gostisbehere. I had a lot of fun watching Ghost. The fact of the matter is that they ultimately paid to get rid of him. They could have at multiple points, I'm sure, gotten actual value back for Shane Gostisbehere rather than having to pay a second-round pick to get rid of him.
That's the thing, though. It's like, I think there's a group of guys that maybe they evaluated for a while, but the thing was, like, I think it's comparable to the Sean Couturier situation where we're like, if he at any point becomes tradable, well, we need him. Like, then that's good for us. Like, they were evaluating these dudes. Like, I think of like a Wade Allison and those sorts of draft picks. It's like they never really had any value. Their value was they might work out for us. Like Carson Terensky and all those guys with the exact same name as him. Yeah, I guess you could have traded him for another organization's exact same guy and then see how it works out for you. Like the, what was it, Justin Bailey for Taylor Lear trade or whatever it was. But like the whole idea was we need to see if these guys are going to work out for us. And if they do, then we have good depth and we have some nice pieces. And if they don't, it means they're bad players. Like I don't know at what point they actually had perceivable value outside of Shane Gostisbehere, who he was scoring in his rookie year at a pace like Bobby Orr. So it was like, hey, maybe we stumbled into something here in like a 3rd round pick that we got for Christopher Stieg, you know, like it was like, oh, this is going to work until it just didn't. So I kind of get where he's coming from. I just don't know if there are any players who actually like fit that. These guys.
I think he's saying like the only thing that I can think is that the suggestion is that we should have sold guys while they were still a box and had the potential of becoming a boat. But I think that in our minds as fans, like we think that's something that you can do. Like why, like NHL GMs, they also know that this guy could be bad or he could be good. And unless there's like ample evidence that he's probably going to be good, like Oliver Bonk at this point. Like at this point, I'm sure people think he's probably going to be something. He could turn out to be nothing. So if you trade him right now, maybe if he ends up sucking, that this is the best you're ever going to get for him. But maybe he doesn't suck. So like it makes sense for the Flyers to hold on to a player like that if they believe, which they clearly do, that he's going to be good. And the only way that you would trade him is if other teams also think he's going to be good. So it's just like, I don't know if like the there is there really for this like hypothetical scenario.
Yeah, I think too, and this is the flip side of it, of the idea that the Flyers have kept some guys too long. And they probably have. There are guys, Ivan Provorov to me is a perfect example of a guy who probably had enormous trade value, and they kept him because they were like, he's going to be our number one defenseman in the future. He's going to be our number one defenseman for the next 10 years. And it turned out that he just wasn't a number one defenseman. Still got pretty good value for him. Probably could have gotten more if you would have traded him 3-4 years before when he was at peak value. The flip side of that, though, is that there are guys who a lot of fans wanted the Flyers to trade because they felt they were at peak value, and then they took further steps. Like a guy that I'm very much thinking of, just based on the way that a lot of people on Flyers Twitter viewed him from, let's say, 2013 through 2017, Sean Couturier. A lot of people wanted Sean Couturier traded because it was he hasn't even scored 40 points. He's a third line center at best. He has no offensive ability. Trade him for something good because this is all he is. And then he emerges as a Selke contender and later winner. And if you would have traded him in 2014 for a decent second pair defenseman, we'd all be kicking ourselves and saying, like, that was the next Justin Williams trade or whatever, Patrick Sharp trade, because this guy was going to be a great player. And instead, because you got impatient, you traded him. Like, honestly, Travis Konecny is another guy. And I know that's a little bit of a different thing because I think a lot of us wanted him traded anyway. But point being is that there were 2 years, 2021 and 2022, where he regressed. He had the big 2019-2020 season. Then he came back from the pandemic and just wasn't the same guy for a couple of years. In retrospect, I think a lot of that was coaching, that he just wasn't being coached the right way. And he got himself into a rut and didn't have the support from above that he needed to figure it out. And once he did, in John Tortorella, he returned to form. But there were a lot of people in 2021, 2022 that wanted Travis Konecny gone. And they wanted to sell low on Travis Konecny because it was the idea, well, like, this is all he is. He's not even that good. And then he reemerges as a borderline point per game guy. And yeah, they could have then traded him and sold high over the last year or so, and they chose not to. They chose to double down and go for the rest of Travis Konecny's career. And time will tell whether that was the right move. But I think Couturier and Konecny are two examples of guys where there was a loud contingent of people that wanted them sold before they broke out, and in retrospect, selling them pre-breakout would have been foolish.
I also I guess, to Kelly's point, a guy who just turned out to be a bust, like German Rubstov, and the rights to Jay O'Brien, maybe. But
Vorobiev.
It's when when were these guys ever? I suppose if you move them for anything, it's well, we got something for nothing, so cool. But I just, what were you getting for the fifth round pick? I just don't understand. Where, listen, I am by no means saying the Flyers have been well run for the last decade. In fact, they've been poorly run pretty much my entire life. A poorly run organization. It's true. But I don't think this is their problem. And the one thing I will say is, while I can't come up with a list of guys they waited too long on that maybe could have got them something, at least guys who it made sense to trade. If you thought Ivan Provorov was going to be your number one defenseman, then you don't trade him because you need a fucking number one defenseman. It's the Konecny argument. Well, in 2 years, we're going to have to trade for a Konecny, so let's just keep him. I don't know if I buy that one, but it's a similar argument. I can come up with a pretty well-known list, though, of guys who they traded, and then we still talk about 2+ decades later. JVR, Justin Williams, Patrick Sharp, Alex Lyons, Sergei Bobrovsky, Stoley the goalie, Richards and Carter. Now, as much as I love Richards, I think they got as great a value as they traded him at the perfect time and got the perfect value. I don't like the trade.
They lost the trade.
Considering
great trade.
Considering
both trades were great.
Considering how it went, I don't think the Jeff Carter trade was great. I think it was fine, but he actually matured into the player we always hoped he would be, and was the final piece on a cup team, and just finished his career a couple months ago.
Yeah.
He did play all this time and was a pretty damn good player for most of it, including being a guy who was a key cog on 2 Stanley Cup champions. There's a long list of dudes they gave up on. We talk about it all the time. I think they make a lot of mistakes. I think a lot of it is in the initial evaluation, like at the draft or the development process, where it's like, yeah, man, we got all these defensemen. We think one of them is going to turn out to be a number one. It's like, buddy, if any of these turn out to be a 2, that'll be great. You know, it's that's just kind of the way it's gone, more so than, oh, they hold on to all these guys when they could have traded them. Like, I don't know what you could have got for German Rubstov, but I don't think it's a whole lot.
No. I think that this is one of those things that as a fan, you remember the Justin Williams because of how dramatic they are. You remember the German Rubstovs because of how dramatic they are. Like, you think in your head, like, oh, this was a first round pick. They should have traded him for something. And then we would have had something instead of the nothing that we ended up with. But like back in the moment, like that, it was different then. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this is like when you do a redraft, it's like a hindsight thing that like, sure, you wish you would have known this at the time, but no one did. So it's like, I don't know. I can't get mad about it.
Yeah, and there's like, Bill, you made a good point with the Provorov thing, where you basically were like, yeah, I guess in retrospect, they maybe should have traded Provorov earlier because now we know he's not a number one. But at the time, the Flyers thought he was the number one, right. So they kept him. I mean, and it's the same thing. Like, you could make a case, I guess, if you wanted to, you could make a case knowing what we know now, like knowing that the 2010s did not go well. And the Flyers did not win a cup, did not come anywhere close to winning a cup. I guess if you wanted to, you could make a case that, like, if you had a time machine, maybe they should have traded Claude Giroux in 2013 or traded Jake Voracek or whatever. But there's also the element of, like, yeah, I know that they didn't win a cup, but, like, they were real good players. And there were a lot of great things we got to see from them because they stayed Flyers. So I get it. Like, I get the argument of, well, if the only goal is to win a cup, then, and Giroux and Voracek and Simmons didn't get us cups, then in retrospect, turn the clock back, trade them, and see what happens in a world where you get insane assets back for those guys because we know now that it didn't produce the outcome we wanted. By the same token, like, and I've said this before on this show about like the Konechny thing, like there are a lot of people who became hockey fans because they watched Claude Giroux do really cool things. A lot of people in this area that became hockey fans that fell in love with hockey because Wayne Simmons was a blast to watch in his prime. And while I agree that the end goal of a front office is always to win a cup, there is an entertainment aspect of this. And I don't think it is quite as simple and cut and dry as, well, if these guys didn't win us a cup, then they're wastes and we should have just traded them when they were in their prime, you know?
And I just think, like, if I had the time machine, I wouldn't change Claude Giroux. I would change to a competent general manager who was like, Andrew McDonald, not a top pair defenseman. Let's get him one of those. Let's get him a goaltender. Like, maybe we can build around him with good players instead of going, yo, we have one of the best setup men of the last decade. Michael Raffl, first line left wing. Look what he did, 21 goals, baby. It's like, yeah, imagine what he could do with a guy who's good at scoring goals. 50? Like, that's the conversation to me. Is like, that's what I would change, not Giroux. Like, everything around him. Let's build a team around the guy rather than just be like, yeah, G and Jake got it. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, like, we'll see. Yeah, maybe make some trades for other guys. I don't know. Anyway, that's that conversation. Before we get into the rest of today's show, I have a very special treat for everyone. Ooh. That's right. It's Charlie time. We're gonna have a commercial break here. Charlie's gonna lead us into it.
I am, and I'm going to tell you about Bet Parks Casino. Now, you're looking for something to do this weekend. It's going to be a rainy weekend. Definitely not the kind of weekend you're going to be rushing down the shore. Go to my casino of choice, Parks Casino. It now offers an epic $5 happy hour with great food and drink every Wednesday through Sunday at the Liberty Bell Gastro Pub. Enjoy $5 drafts of Ford Stout, Victory Seasonal, or Parks Pills. $5 glass of Albertoni Cabernet, and enjoy the drink of the summer, $5 Twisted Tea Frozen Whiskey Arnold Palmer's. Summer is here. All roads lead to Parks Casino, the #1 casino in Pennsylvania. It's got 3,200 state-of-the-art slots, 115 live table games, a beautiful poker room, plus a collection of incredible award-winning restaurants. Visit parkscasino.com. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Parks Casino. This is how you win.
Yeah. Charlie Reed.
Hell of a job, Charlie. And if you're looking for someone to do a hell of a job for you, you got to check out Ace Hardware Home Services, because they got that. That's right. If you got a leaky pipe, Ace Hardware Home Services is around the block with everything you need to fix it, including the person to do the fixing. Got an air conditioning issue? They have a person for that as well. And if you've got a faucet that you're like, oh, I'll get to that, like, you know, a couple of months ago, maybe, they have a person for that as well, because Ace Hardware is not just the helpful hardware folks. They're the helpful home service and repair folks as well. Listen, I know we all like to pretend that we're pretty handy men. You know, oh yeah, I'm a guy. I can figure this out. I can watch a YouTube video. My dad taught me this when I was 11. You quickly remember, like, probably not. Probably not. Well, guess what? Ace Hardware has you covered. From plumbing to heating and cooling, they've got the trusted pros to keep your home humming all year long. Ace Hardware Home Services, we're bringing helpful home, the helpful you love, from the store now to your front door. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at acehardwarehomeservices.com to get started on your next project. Way to go, everybody. I can't believe I forgot the Andrew McDonald buyout in my list of guys who got bought out.
All of us have decided, I think, collectively to simply wipe that from our memories. We don't need to think about it anymore.
It's the best for our collective sanities.
Yes.
I can just never, like, here's $30 million. And he was like, not just like Ivan Provorov. All right, you know, he's not a number one. You can probably get by with him on a second pair. He does some things well. It's like, no, this guy is actively bad. He is one of the worst players in the league. All right, yeah, here's $30 million. That looking through, because we're going to talk about our hits and misses later. Like, I went back and just looked through some of those, like, mid 2010s, like when we first started, and like right before that with the Broad Street Hockey Pod. Those defenses, I know that Claude Giroux could have been better in some playoffs. Absolutely. Especially like 2016, 2018, those times. But to think that those blue lines could have possibly got you to a conference final is you're as dumb as anyone who ran this team poorly if you think those teams ever had a legitimate chance unless a mediocre to bad goalie had a good 3 weeks. Like, that was what you were crossing your fingers on. Oh, if Claude Giroux is just like scoring at the rate of 2012 in, you know, a playoff series that was barely hockey, and we get goaltending that we've never seen in this town since like 1987. Yeah, sure, this is possible, but it wasn't. Like, anyway, so last F Around Friday, we did the hits leaders. It was Physicality Friday. Guys who've been in the top 50 in hits for this team going back to the lockout. And we got to around like 2016. We talked a little about 16-17 and a little about 15-16. I just want to back up and go to 16-17 real quick. We talked about Gudas and Shen. I love Charlie calling Braden Shen chaos. He was just chaos. Like, his style of play was absolutely asinine. So, and like Wayne Simmons is on the list in 16-17. He finished 49th with 162 hits. This one I did not see coming, though. Coming in at 38th in the league in 16-17, Michael Del Zotto himself with 173 hits.
DJ DZ.
I can't believe that that's a real thing. But honestly, I think there was a year in maybe Vancouver as well where he showed up in the top 50. I know, like, the perception of him is like cocky puck mover who, if he's scratched, he's DMing porn stars. But like, he can throw it around a little bit too.
He sure was a guy that played hockey. I think back to that time period and I'm like, how do we continue? Like, what kept us here? I don't understand what we were doing. We could have tapped out at any point. And we were like, nah, we're gonna keep this going. I love this hockey team. They're so good.
So here is the wild thing for me about Michael Del Zotto. And when I saw this on his stat sheet, I did a double take because I truly did not remember this. I did not remember that Michael Del Zotto was on this team for 3 years.
Yeah, it was a while.
Like for me, he's just a guy who like was there for a year and then was gone. He's so irrelevant. Like
Eric
you know how, like Bill, you know how you always talk about the idea of like the Hall of Fame is really like, can you tell the story of hockey without this guy? And if you can't, he probably should be in the Hall of Fame. Like Marc-Andre Fleury is, in my mind, an overrated goalie. But I do agree that like you probably can't tell the story of his era without talking about Marc-Andre Fleury. He is a notable player, so sure, it is the Hall of Fame. You can very easily tell the story of 2010 Flyers hockey without ever even coming close to mentioning Michael Del Zotto. And he was on the team for 3 seasons. Like, that's 30% of the decade.
It's I guess like Flyers years are counted. We attribute a lot of it to like the pandemic and like the 1920 season to like present feels both like a decade and 1 year somehow. Yeah. But really it's like 2013 strike year on is measured in dog years. Like, yeah. I don't know if this is 1 or 7 seasons. I honestly have no idea. And that, like, I looked all this up and I had no memory of Michael Del Zotto being on the team for 3 years. And I guess it's like he played so sparingly, but you would think like the conversation was so much like, hey, get this guy in. He has to be better than like whoever the hell else we're playing. But that's the thing. He didn't play sparingly. Like looking at his time on ice, the first season he played 22 minutes a night. The second season he played 23. 22. The third season he played 19-30. Like this guy was a borderline top pair defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers, and I forgot he was on the team for 3 years.
Wait a minute. I do not remember a scenario in which Michael Del Zotto was getting 23 minutes a night. This is made up.
I need this
wild.
Like the way they audited the hits count earlier this year or last season. I need to be shown proof of this. The way I need to be shown proof of all Robert Haig's hits. Like, no, I just don't believe it. Like, when did they occur? I never saw them. Like, I need to be shown proof of this to believe it, Charlie. Like, Michael Del Zotto. And this list is very much just a way of, like, yeah, we're going to remember some guys. This is the ultimate remembering some guys. Because 3 seasons, I remember, like, in my mind, he's Eric Gustafsson number 2. Like, oh, yeah, he was here for a little bit. He played a couple of games.
Yeah, he was
and it didn't work.
Mark off. Like he was just like here for a minute. Like I do not, I literally do not recall a time in my life when Michael Del Zotto was like a mainstay, extremely important cog on the Flyers roster.
And he was objectively speaking, he was
completely erased it from my mind.
I mean, they got him. They got him. Here. If you remember, the reason why they got Del Zotto, because they got him, if I remember correctly, in like August of the 2014 offseason. And they got him because they found out that Kimmo Timonen couldn't play because he had blood clots. So they rushed to sign Del Zotto because it was like, well, we need somebody. And I think that's part of the reason why in my head, I have him memory hold as like, well, he was just a 1-year stopgap dude. Instead, no. For 3 years, he was a top 4, if not top pair defenseman on the Philadelphia Flyers. You know that's how bad their defense score was.
You know what? Stackatoshi, you might have Michael Del Zotto might qualify. He might be a guy that they could have just been like, you know what? Let's trade him. Like that he might actually qualify for this list. We talked about 15-16 last year and how that was or last week. And how that was like a legitimately physical team that got in on the forecheck. They have 3 forwards in the top 50, plus 2 defensemen as well, who finished in the top 50 in hits. And we talked about that team itself last week. But thinking about our conversation yesterday, how like Farabee, absolutely, he needs to be a guy who scores a little bit more on the forecheck off the cycle and everything, establish zone time rather than just, yeah, man, it's not all going to be 3-on-2s. What could that 15-16 team like maybe teach this current Flyers team though? Like, obviously, like, just do it. But was there something to, like, I guess having the personnel like Wayne Simmons, like Braden Shen, that makes it a lot easier. But I feel like the Flyers have some guys that aren't like the smallest.
It would be nice to see them adopt a little bit of this. And I do think that it would probably help with what we talked about yesterday, that last third of the season when things get a little bit spicier as far as physicality goes. I mean, I guess this is a John Tortorella thing. Like, does he not want them playing that way? Or are they just not doing it?
The first year he coached here, he very much did. I mean, the Flyers were
They were, yeah.
But then he opened it up this past year. And I think that was the right move. Like, I think the Flyers are right to play a more rush-based, forward-thinking style. However, you still have to be able, and Torts said this on multiple occasions during the season. He didn't quite use these words, but he basically was like, look, we want to play fast. We want to attack a transition. But sometimes you're just not going to be able to. And we have to learn how to do the other thing if we have to do it. If another team basically says, we're just not going to let you score on the rush. We're going to have a guy far back to make it so you never have an odd man rush. We're not going to take risks. We're not going to send that third man in on the forecheck to give you the opportunity of coming back in transition. And we're going to make you grind it out. The Flyers do have to get better. Not everybody. Like, there are some guys like Garnet Hathaway who, like, yeah, like they're built for this shit. Ryan Poehling. But guys like Joel Farabee need to get better at being able to do this if necessary. Like, I want Joel Farabee to be great on the rush. He is real good at it. But if they're not giving you the rush, you have to be able to thrive on the forecheck. And I think there are some guys in this team that are still learning how to thrive on the forecheck.
I want to get to 2014-15 now. Listen, both Shen brothers are in the top 50. They finished 5 hits apart to finish 40th and 42nd. But the guy I want to talk about, coming in at 22nd in the league with 216 hits in 14-15, Zach Ronaldo. And
our leader.
Man, I was just such a Ronaldo fan because
we all were.
He was so goddamn ridiculous. Like, he was just, I loved when they tried to, like, hey, let's put him out there with Couturier and Reed and see if we can make him a third liner, a penalty killer. It's like, a penalty killer? What? He's the one in the box. What point? Like, oh yeah, we have him as part of the rotation, but we can only use him like 1 out of every 4 penalties because that's the only time he's not the one in the box. But I don't know if he's like a miss because, like, what the hell was he ever actually going to be? But I was endlessly entertained by how ridiculous Zach Ronaldo played hockey. He
was a little ball of nonsense the entire time he was here. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't a fan of. I am like genetically predisposed to like these kinds of players. I can't help myself. Logically, I know it's not great. I know, but like once I see him on the ice, I'm like, fuck it. This is fun. And he was a lot of fun. And then getting a 3rd round pick for him was a fucking masterclass.
The greatest
thing anyone's ever done. For
best thing Ron Hextall did. I don't 100%. Care what that 3rd round pick became. That's a hell of a trade.
I will say that for me, I find it much easier to feel fondly about Zach Ronaldo now than I did when he was on the team.
Fair.
Because, I mean, we're talking about a guy who, like, his underlying numbers were as bad as they could be. Like, he was on the team because he was a crazy person.
Yep.
Like, if you remember, he makes his debut in the playoffs because Laviolette lost his mind and decided he wanted a crazy person in the lineup.
Yep.
That's why I loved him, because me and Frankie called him Ogie Oglethorpe. They're calling him up for the fucking playoffs just because they want to beat up Buffalo because they're mad at Buffalo. Like, they're going to unleash this lunatic. And you know what? They won the series.
There you go.
Yeah.
They did. But here's a wild Zach Ronaldo stat. Because, like, look, we're looking at these hit numbers, and we're like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, Ronaldo, 216 hits in 2014, 2015, 2013, 2014, 231 hits.
231
Okay.
hits.
That's a lot. But it's even more than you think. Why? Okay, 231 hits in 2013, 2014. 14th in the league. This guy averaged 742 of ice time. He had that many hits in less than 8 minutes a night.
So that's like 3 hits in those 8 minutes.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Like, I wonder if
he would have had 1,000 if he was a top 6 forward.
I wonder if his hits per 60 is like the greatest of all time.
Gotta be up there.
He was just, I will just never forget, like, the all-time Ronaldo moment, other than just getting called up for the playoffs because Laviolette was like, all right, we'll show them. When he boarded Letang, and then the Penguins spend the rest of the game trying to get even, and the Flyers somehow come back and win. And in the locker, like, he hurt Letang. It was bad. Like, it was a bad hit. Absolutely. Yeah. Instead of, like, being a normal person post-game, he just goes, change the game.
I mean, he's legitimately a crazy person.
He wasn't wrong.
He's a little touched in the head, like, genuinely. But it was fun to watch.
Also on that 13-14 team, and this is just like when I say, like, what was Claude Giroux supposed to do? Also on this list in 2013-14, you have Luke Schenn at 260 hits, 6th in the league, and Nick Grossman at 189 hits, 44th in the league. They went to the playoffs this year.
They sure did.
They went to the playoffs in 2014. They had a defense.
They almost beat the Rangers, who went to the Cup final.
They went 7 with the Rangers with Henrik Lundqvist. Luke Schenn and Nick Grossman were on the ice enough, both of them, to finish in the top 50 in hits. What was Claude Giroux supposed to do? Like, he can't play offense and defense in all 60 minutes. Like, sometimes he had to leave the ice. And then who were we putting out there? Zach Ronaldo? Like, what? I just, it makes me, again, yeah, Giroux could have been better in some playoffs. Also, what was he supposed to do?
Also, like, when you have one good player, the other team who's also trying to win is probably going to do everything they can to stop that one good player from doing stuff. So Claude Giroux was kind of fucked in the playoffs because he was the good player.
That 2014 Rangers team was the first team that I was like, finally, someone cracked this code. It was like, hey, if we pressure Giroux on the half wall on the power play, like, it's going to be really hard because they don't have anyone else.
Right.
Like, it's going to make things really difficult for everyone because, like, Jake is good, but he's all the way over there. So he's going to have to, like, jump 2 defensemen to make that pass. Everyone else is a mediocre player. So good luck. Like, and it didn't work. And the Rangers were the first team. I was like, I can't believe it took a team this long to, like, let's have someone on top of Claude Giroux rather than giving him the space to, like, make all the crazy plays he makes.
Speaking of remembering some guys, Josh White in the chat, Rusty Fedotenko, who I had not thought about in a very long time.
Yeah,
remember when they brought him back?
Yeah,
yes.
He came back.
He came back.
That was...
I love Remember Some Guys Day.
It's like some of the best stuff we do is Remember Some Guys Day.
It's the best.
And it's just like, again, that was like their big acquisition. Oh, we brought back Rusty. Oh,
good.
Yeah, this will put us over the top, baby. Claude Giroux's probably winning the Hart this year.
Must we always bring a guy back?
He deserved Hart votes. I'm not saying he does. I think the couple of years he finished 4th, he at least deserved to be a finalist. He deserved Hart votes every single year. Claude Giroux was just dragging this team of oversized, slow defensemen and bottom 6 forwards to the playoffs every other year for a decade. 2012-13, pretty standard here. Luke Shen 4th, Zach Ronaldo 6th, Braden Shen 46th. 11-12, man. Hartnell, 188 hits.
Scotty
Hartnell, man. Like
I'm
that
gonna tell you
2012
what.
year.
I feel like we don't give Scott Hartnell enough respect. He was fun as hell when he was here.
The perfect
he
flyer.
was really good.
He was really good. He was fun. He was goofy. He fell down all the time. We got a whole bit out of it. Like, he was a great flyer. I'm glad he's still around, actually, because he's great.
He's great. I think too, like, and maybe we understand this on some level, but I give him so much credit because it would have been very easy for him to either A, ignore the Hartnell down thing on Twitter, or B, get annoyed by it because, like, it is like making fun of it. It is objectively speaking making fun of it.
That's what we were doing.
And instead, the dude just full on embraced it and turned it into a charity thing. Like, come on. That is awesome.
Yes.
So in something I always, if I ever get a chance to interview Scott Hartnell, like there's so many guys I just want to ask one question to. I have one question for Hartnell, and it goes to his final year, I believe, with the Flyers, 2013-14. It was going to be his first, I guess, probably full season as a Flyer, where he didn't have 100 penalty minutes. And yeah, in 12-13, he had 70, but that was just the short
year.
He was going to finish shy of 100 penalty minutes for the first time as a Philadelphia Flyer. And in the final game of the season, I believe like late, I'm trying to see if I can bring up his game log. He gets kicked out of the game and ends up with 103 penalty minutes thanks to 15 minutes of a spearing penalty. And I would love to know if he did. I think it was like at the end of the third period, he just speared someone in front of the Carolina net and gets kicked out. Like, I would love to know if he was like, I need these 100 penalty minutes. Fuck it. Like, I would just absolutely love to know if he did that on purpose, because I've always thought he did, because that's when I was in the press box and I remember being like looking at his stats and being like, he's real short. Like, unless something happens, he's not going to have 100 penalty minutes this year, and finished with 103. He got there.
That's
15 minutes of penalties, a 10-minute misconduct, and a 5 for spearing.
Bill Asks One Question is a podcast that I would absolutely listen to.
It would be, I think, fun. Just looking at the rest of this list, like going back, there's some fun names like 10-11, Darryl Powell, Andre Mazzaros. Andre Mazzaros might be one of the biggest what-ifs for this team ever. Maybe we talk about him in a What If Wednesday show. But goddamn, he was good until the injury. Like, he was really good.
He was really good. I will agree he was good. What I will say, though, is that something you have to remember with Mazzaros is that he was benefiting from the fact that he was being used in a sheltered role. But, like, that was the point. The point, like, why they got Mazzaros was they survived the playoff run leaning on 4 guys, leaning on their top 4 defensemen and never using the third pair because everybody stunk. And then the idea was, well, let's just get a guy to be on the third pair, and suddenly we don't have to run our top 4 into the ground anymore. And Mazzaros was real good in that role. That said, like, it's easier to be real good when Kimmo Timonen and Chris Pronger and Carl and Coburn are taking all of the tough minutes, and you're just able to feast on fourth lines.
Oh, absolutely. But that's like, if they have him a year earlier, they win the Stanley Cup. Like, that's
very possible. Very possible.
It's very, like, it's on the table. I know we can point to so many things and like this and that, but like, if they just have a 5-man defense instead of a 4-man defense, they could have won the Stanley Cup. Like, I always love Mazzaros. Part of it is anyone with a Z in their last name is cool. But I just always was a fan of him and like look back and go, God, like, what if he doesn't, what was it, an Achilles, I think? Like, God damn, that's a rough one. That's a tough injury. Marc-Andre Bourdon, what was him? What was he? Concussions? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
like,
his story was sad
Yeah.
because, and this is just
Yes.
like a classic example of a young hockey player trying to do anything he can to impress. He was concussed
Yes.
and basically lied and said he was fine and rushed back because he was afraid that if he sat out, he was going to lose his job. Like he wasn't going to have a spot anymore because he was a young defenseman trying to make his way. And then he gets concussed again and he's never the same afterwards. Like, and do I understand why he did it? Sure. But that should be a cautionary tale to young hockey players.
Yes,
like, look,
don't do
you
that.
know, don't mess around with concussions. I know in the moment it feels like you're missing on your opportunity, but it's not worth it. If you got a concussion, just take the time. It's your brain, man.
And just like even worst case scenario in the other, like the alternate universe, he loses his spot. Like, what if you fully recover and all right, maybe you don't have that NHL career, but like you could have been a pro somewhere for a long time, you know? And it's sad to like think about. It's a bummer, but like it's hard to have that foresight when you're that age and like all you've ever wanted is the NHL. But like, buddy, a life playing in the AHL and a life playing overseas is way better than like every time the lights come on, you get dizzy. Like that's those two things. Yeah, like
it's why the decision can never be in their hands. It can never be in their hands. They're going to play every time.
When they tell you they're feeling all right, give them another week.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, it's better for everyone.
Yes.
If the Flyers have Mazzaros and goddamn Bourdon, maybe they're not spending the next part of the decade looking for guys to be those players. You know?
Yeah.
It's like
that was what I was thinking. It's just like, I understand in the moment, Bourdon probably thought if I lose this spot, I might never get it back. We've just spent like 40 minutes talking about all the bad defensemen this team had. Like, in retrospect, he was going to get other opportunities because that defense was real crappy. And like, if he would have gone a different path, maybe he solidifies himself as a decent second pair defense for the Flyers. I don't know, but it's a bummer. It's one of those stories that just makes me sad because it's like kind of I wonder how this would have played out if he would have made a different decision. And I understand why he made it. It just sucks.
All right, there's some other interesting names on this list. Carcillo, Powell, like Andrew Alberts, who I forgot was a real guy. Jason Smith, his 1 year with the team, finishes 49th. But I want to get to some of our biggest misses because that's the point of today's show, the biggest hits and misses. We did the big hitters, and now it's time for the shit we struck out on. I went back just like looking at some names because, you know, it's Remember Some Guys Day. I went back to 16-17 because that was the first season we all worked together. That was the first when it was the four of us with Steph doing Broad Street Hockey Radio. And I just wanted to like see, okay, because there's some hilarious, my God. The first one that always comes to mind is Jordan Weal. I was a big proponent of Jordan Weal. They get him along with a third-round pick from the Kings for LeCavalier and Luke Shen. Hell of a trade. Get something for, you know, nothing, basically. Luke Shen turned out to have a hell of a career in a role. It was just like, yeah, man, we're using him as a top 4 defenseman, and he's not. We'll get more on Luke Shen in a minute. But that year when they traded for him, they're making a playoff push in that second half. Remember, they traded Luke Shen. Braden Shen got hot, and suddenly, like, him and Ghost are carrying us to the playoffs, basically. He only gets into 4 games, but the following season, he has 8 goals and 12 points in 23 games. He's showing some promise. Like, all right, he might be something. Looks like he can put the puck in the net a little bit, maybe in an offensive role. He can be something. However, the year after that, 69 games, once again scores 8 goals. All right. I always thought he had in him, like, 1 year with a high shooting percentage. He's going to have a 20 or 30 goal year and trick someone into paying him. Never happened. His career high is, in fact, 8 goals. However, last year in the KHL, 30 goals, 77 points, top 5 in both categories. He did it. Just not in the NHL.
Found the spot.
Is Weal the one that had the best player not playing in the NHL currently moniker? Was that him or was that Braden Shen?
That was
definitely
Braden.
That was Braden Shen.
That was definitely Braden Shen.
Okay.
Yeah, Jordan Weal is fascinating to me for a lot of reasons. But you're thinking back, like you went through kind of his career. the reason why people got excited about it, particularly of the stat variety. So he plays in those 23 games at the at the end of the 2016-2017 season. 12 points in 23 games, okay, like that's fine, nothing mind-blowing, but it's fine. His underlying numbers were through the roof bonkers good. Like he was driving play to an insanely good degree over that run. And if you remember, because he hadn't played enough NHL games, he was an unrestricted free agent. He was going to be an unrestricted free agent that summer. And the Flyers then had to actually negotiate with him, and they signed him, I think, like a few days before free agency started. But there was that whole like 2-month period between the end of that season and the start of free agency. Like Flyers fans were worried that they were going to let Jordan Weal go. It's like, we might have found something here, and now you're going to let him go for nothing. One thing I will never forget about the Jordan Weal re-sign, though, and it's funny, this bit has kind of died. I'm kind of scared that if I bring it up, it's going to recur again. But screw it. I'm going to bring it up. So there was a running bit at Broad Street Hockey, and it spilled over onto Twitter a little bit, that like the bit was that I talk about working out all the time. Which I actually don't.
Get it.
But the bit was basically like that if I ever said like, sorry, I'll do that once I'm done from the gym, it'd be like, we get it, Charlie, you work out. You don't have to brag about it. But that bit was started because of Jordan Weal. Because what happened was, so I had just moved into an apartment complex in Fairmount, and the apartment complex had a gym. So that lead up to the start of free agency in the summer of 2017, like the big thing on everybody's mind was, are the Flyers going to re-sign Jordan Weal? Because they still had his rights, obviously, so they could at any moment announce an extension, but they hadn't yet. So it was like a night, I just recently moved into my apartment, and I was bored, so I walked down the hallway to the gym and worked out, and then got back to my apartment and went to my desktop and saw that the Flyers had re-signed Jordan Weal, and I popped in the Broad Street Hockey Slack channel like, God damn it, I missed the Jordan Weal thing. I was at the gym. And then everybody lost their minds giving me shit for basically bragging about going to the gym, even though that was very much not my intent. I was just annoyed that that I missed the Jordan Weal thing because I was lifting. And then it became a like 6-7 year long bit because of Jordan Weal. So I blame Jordan Weal for that.
Come to Broad Street Hockey. We have a fun Slack chat. It's part of the bonus.
I think, Charlie, you absolutely just brought that back.
I'm 100% bringing it back.
It's very much like so I'm, doing, whatever privileged thing you get to do, being like the #1 Flyers beat writer. And Kelly goes, ooh. Yeah.
That's my favorite bit that I do. Yeah.
But I loved, I just always saw something in Jordan Weal, and it just never came together for him until at least now. He's tearing it up in the KHL, so good for him. I mentioned Luke Schenn, and we would get to him. This is a huge miss on my part. I liked the Schenn for JVR trade.
I liked it at the time. I
hated it.
Listen, shamefully, at the time, I was one of those fans who was a little anti-JVR. Because I was bitter that we should have had the first overall pick that season. So I held it against him for no particular reason. And also, I'm a Neanderthal, and I'm like, why aren't you hitting? You're big. What's your problem? Why are you so soft? I don't get it. And so I was fine with that trade. In hindsight, not so good.
Would have been nice to have that sort of goal production through his prime.
Probably would have been
good. Not just bring him back at the end of the contract we already signed him to, and get the before and after of JVR's prime, and then after drafting him second overall, missing all the actually good years of his career. But I actually found it on YouTube. I liked Luke Schenn because I just thought there was more upside to him as a top 4 defenseman. And it goes back to maybe what was his rookie year. I think it was 2009-10. And he scored a beautiful bar down goal on a 3-on-2 against the Flyers. It was gorgeous. And I just thought, listen, if this could be who he is, like maybe there's something here. I just remembered that goal and kind of thought that was who he. The way I thought Garnet Hathaway, the way I thought Garnet Hathaway had more offense, because after I looked up his splits, it was like, oh, he always puts up numbers against the Flyers. Nobody else, though. Like, Luke Schenn made one play against the Flyers, and I thought that's who he was. And I was very wrong. It turns out he gets stuck in his defensive zone and hits people. And that's pretty much it.
He does a lot of hits, though.
He does.
He do be hitting.
He does a lot of hits. He certainly... Like, the years he
Can't
plays,
take that
like,
away from him.
The years he plays a lot of games, he's in the top 50, usually in the top 10 in hits. It's pretty wild. But if you're a defenseman hitting a lot, there's a good chance you're in the defensive zone.
Hey, I'll give Luke Schenn all the credit in the world. Not in a million years did I expect he would still be in the NHL.
That's fair.
Age.
Yeah.
But he's made himself a valued player in the NHL, where teams are still signing him and still having him play not insignificant roles. He's won cups. Good for you, Luke.
Yeah, seriously.
I want to get a couple more misses in, but before we do that, I want to thank all of our PHLY diehards joining us today, all of our subscribers. We couldn't do it here at PHLY without the diehards. Very much appreciate all of your contributions. It's very much appreciated. Make sure, if you aren't a diehard and maybe you want to read Charlie's article, he just posted. What season review did you just do, Owen Tippett?
Owen Tippett. We'll talk about that next week.
We will get to Owen Tippett on Monday, but if you want to be prepared, go to allphly.com, sign up to be a diehard, read Charlie's Owen Tippett and all the other season reviews he's published so far, and be ready for Monday's show. I'm going to get to the Super Chats, though, so we get those in before we do another miss or two on all of our parts. So if you would be so kind, Tyler, hit us with the Super Chats. All right, the first one from Dylan Phillips. Fuck Around Friday, do you think Crosby now, coming to the Flyers this year, does he make them contenders? Hypothetical, obviously. 2 firsts, 2 seconds straight up. Just curious.
That is truly an F Around Friday question.
They would never. The Penguins wouldn't trade Sidney Crosby if Crosby was dead. They wouldn't trade us his ashes.
There's something on Twitter for some reason today where people are speculating that now he's going to get traded.
Cool.
Oh, is that what it is?
I think so. Cool. Yeah, and I don't.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But let's say it does. Let's put Crosby on this Flyers team. It took no current NHLers to get the trade done. The team is as is, except let's put Sidney Crosby at 1C. What does that make the Philadelphia Flyers?
A little bit better. I mean, honestly, like, this season is weird because, like, I feel like there's nothing matters except for the goaltending. I know this is like a new thing for me that I keep saying, but like, if the goaltending's good, I feel like this is a team that could, like last season, maybe be pushing for a playoff spot. If the goaltending is bad, like literally nothing else matters. They're going to be dog shit. So like, if you put Sidney Crosby on this team and the goalies are trash, nothing's happening.
It's the Penguins.
If you put Sidney Crosby on this team and the goalies are good, like probably a little closer to the playoffs. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it would move the needle that much, honestly.
I think if they got at least average goaltending and Crosby was on this team, they'd make the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're a playoff team.
That's that. Like,
maybe they're a contender if you get Crosby and Mitchkov is a star immediately. But I think that's the only one.
Gonna be.
Like, he is 85 points in his rookie year, Mitchkov. Then maybe they enter the playoffs and they are a second-tier contender. But no, I don't think the addition of a still very good, but definitely past his peak, Sidney Crosby turns the Flyers into a cup contender. No.
I feel like that's a move that you would make if, like, this was the year you were going for it. And we're not there yet. So.
No. It's just like, well, then who's still don't know who's the centers behind him. Like, no idea if those guys can play or not still. All right, let's get the next super chat in. From Linden49, talking about some bad trades here. Adam Oates for our boy Olette Kelly.
Yes.
First, second, and third round picks at 02. 19 games played, lost to Sens in 5, scored 1 goal in regulation. Yeah, that was.
I was so convinced
did
that
have-
Maxime Ouellet was going to be a good goalie. Like, I was convinced he was going to be
do
good.
believe Adam Oates in that playoff series in which they only scored the 2 goals had assists on both. I'm pretty sure that's. I might not be.
You could
I'm
be right.
fairly certain that's true though. I liked Ouellet too. We were Phantoms fans.
I was going to say that was a time in my life when I was heavily into the Phantoms. So like I was convinced every single one of those dudes was going to be an Impact NHL player.
All right, let's see what we have next. From David Shub. Since it's an F around Friday, I partied with Lindros in Punta Cana when I was like 19. Saw him almost getting a scrap with a dad over a water polo.
That rules.
That's awesome.
Okay, but how old was Lindros though? Like, so you were 19.
That's a key question.
I was going to say, was it like 2 years ago? And like 55-year-old Eric Lindros is like throwing down in a pool in Punta Cana?
Still a competitor, man. Still a competitor.
Right. These guys don't
never
quit.
leaves you.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
I kind of hope this was last week.
Me too.
But
I would
closer to his prime.
Kill to like end up accidentally hanging out with Eric Lindros in a pool.
In his
fucking around with Eric Lindros.
In his days partying with Philadelphia, maybe connected guys. Potentially convicted connected guys.
No.
All right, and this last super chat we have, happy F around Friday. Anyone going to Green Day this evening from Gary B? I absolutely am, Gary. I will be there. I might miss Rancid, which is a bummer. But I will see the Smashing Pumpkins and Green Day for sure.
I need to know what the Smashing Pumpkins are, because isn't it just Billy Corgan now? Like, isn't the rest of the band gone?
Hasn't it always just been Billy Corgan?
That's fair.
Always been his vehicle.
After their first album, I really got away from them. Sorry.
We got one more.
Here from Hattrick Patrick. If G isn't retired by the time we're ready to push for the playoffs, do you think the Flyers would try to bring him back?
Dude,
and should they?
Nothing more than for Claude Giroux to be the old guy without a cup that comes back to Philly and we finally get it done. Like, nothing would be better. I don't know if he would want to come back here.
I just am like, I love G and all. I just am like, all right, man, you did your time. Like, you did more than your part here. Like, that's.
I mean, yeah, but I feel like he seems to be ending up to be one of these players that's going to be good until he's 40. Like, not as good as he used to be, but like Joe Thornton, like a reliable NHLer until the day that he retires. So like, if we needed a depth piece for a playoff run and we really thought we were going to go for it, I feel like Claude Giroux would be like a perfect addition, but like, I don't know what world that happens in.
Third line.
It would be a fantastic story. What I will say that I've always said, because like literally from the day that Claude Giroux was traded, there have been questions about when the Flyers going to bring him back. And it's just because fans love him so much. Like, people just want Claude Giroux back.
And the Flyers do love bringing a guy back.
And he said he would waive his no move for more teams if he was guaranteed you'd bring me right back. And they said no. And that's why he said, okay, then only Florida. So he wanted to come back at least at some point.
I think he would be open to it. The point I've made from the jump, when people have said repeatedly, like, when does Claude Giroux come back? Are they going to try to get Claude Giroux back? The point I've made is that the Flyers will not bring Claude Giroux back unless they believe that the Flyers leadership group has solidified in his absence. Because their big concern about bringing him back now would be, if Claude Giroux were to come back, he would immediately be the captain again. Because there are a lot of people who were here, not as many as there certainly used to be, but a lot of the core guys like Lawton, Couturier, guys like that, like, if Claude Giroux showed up, they would immediately defer to him because he's G. Like, he's a franchise legend and he was the captain for years, and they would immediately be like, all right, I'm not the leader anymore, G's the leader. They would bring Claude Giroux back, I believe, if it gets to the point where the Flyers have such a strong, refurbished leadership core that Claude Giroux coming back would not shake that at all. Because then G can just be a guy. rather than the guy. They would not bring him back if there's any concern that he would immediately go back to being the guy, because they really did want to turn over a new leaf and turn the franchise over to new people. If Claude Giroux could come back and just be part of the gang rather than Claude Giroux, the captain, I think they would do it. But they're not there yet. Like
No.
because I've had people ask me like, well, would they trade for Claude Giroux at the trade deadline this year? You know, if Ottawa's not good. And it's just like, I don't think they're at the point where they believe that the team is ready to integrate Claude Giroux back in as just one of the guys rather than the guy.
Yeah.
All right. It's 2:05. We can do this miss thing again like next week, like we did the hits. I want to get everyone out of here. I want to get Tyler out of here because he's working like 9 shows today. So that is all the time we have for you on PHLY Flyers today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for hanging out. If you haven't already, you got to hit that subscribe button. Follow us right here on the YouTube page. Set those reminders so you never miss a live show. We'll be back on Monday. If I had to guess, I would guess at 1 o'clock. But I don't know. Anything could always change. But follow us on Twitter at PHLY_Flyers and follow the podcast wherever you get those. Just search PHLY Flyers. My name is Bill Matz. That's Kelly Hinkle. That's Charlie O'Connor. Until next week, you stay loose and sexy, Philly.